Disclaimer: this program contains graphic descriptions of real crimes. Viewer discretion is advised. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. Her hands trembled as she held the note he left on the kitchen counter. "I love you. Don't worry about a thing." But worry gnawed at her like a shadow she couldn't shake. Emma Carter had always trusted her husband, Daniel. Every smile, every gentle touch, every whispered "I'm here." Tonight, the house felt different. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, they all sounded sharper, heavier. Something in the air made her skin crawl, though she couldn't name it. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, staring at the floor. That's when she smelled it, a faint metallic scent coming from the basement. Her stomach twisted. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself, but she didn't believe it. For weeks, she'd noticed small things, tools out of place, boxes moved, noises late at night. She had brushed them off. Daniel was a careful man, a loving husband, a friend to everyone who knew him. But tonight, something in her gut screamed that the truth was closer than she realized. A thump echoed from below. Emma froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Another thump, then a dragging sound, like something heavy being shifted across the floor. She stood, trembling, and walked to the basement door. Daniel had promised he'd fix the leak in the pipes, but her instincts screamed at her, "Go slow." The basement light flickered faintly. The metal handle felt cold under her fingers as she hesitated. She wanted to call out his name, but fear stopped her voice. Slowly, almost reverently, she opened the door, and the darkness seemed to breathe, as if the house itself was warning her to turn back. "Daniel." Her voice was barely a whisper. Silence answered. A sudden chill ran down her spine. The basement was darker than usual, the smell stronger. Something was down there, something he hadn't told her. Something he had hidden. Emma's hand shook as she reached for the light switch. The bulb flickered to life, casting a weak, yellow glow over the cluttered floor. Boxes, old furniture, and a strange rug lay scattered, but something caught her eye. A corner of the rug was lifted, just slightly, a shadow underneath it. Her breath hitched. Her hands felt numb. She wanted to step back, to run, to scream, but part of her needed to see, needed to know. And in that moment, Emma realized the truth. The man she had trusted completely, the man she had loved, might not be the person she thought he was. Emma's heart pounded so loudly she was certain Daniel could hear it, even though he wasn't there. She leaned closer to the lifted rug, her trembling hand hovering above the shadow. The metallic smell grew stronger, almost suffocating, and her stomach churned. She knew she should step back, call the police, leave the basement immediately. But a part of her, a part that always needed answers, pushed her forward. Slowly, she reached under the rug. Her fingers brushed something cold and hard, a metal handle. She recoiled for a second, but her curiosity wouldn't let her stop. Emma gripped the handle and pulled. It resisted at first, then gave way with a soft creak, revealing a small trapdoor built into the floor. Her breath hitched. It was carefully concealed, perfectly designed to remain hidden. Who had done this? Why? And most importantly, what was underneath? Emma's instincts screamed at her to call for help, but she couldn't, not yet. She needed to know. With shaking hands, she opened the trapdoor further, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that escaped smelled of damp concrete and something fouler. She hesitated at the top of the stairs. Each step she imagined could be her last glimpse of safety, her last chance to turn back. And then she saw it, a glint of something metallic on the floor below. Tools, chains, something deliberately hidden. Emma swallowed hard. Her mind raced with questions, with fear, with disbelief. She thought of Daniel, the man she trusted, the man she had laughed with, cried with, shared every intimate part of her life with. Could he really have been hiding something here beneath their home this entire time? A sudden noise, a soft shuffle from below made her freeze. Her heart skipped a beat. Someone was there, or something was moving. She gasped and stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance on the stairs. Emma's mind screamed for her to run, but her body felt rooted to the spot. Then another sound, closer, deliberate, and chilling, echoed from the darkness beneath the trapdoor. It wasn't pipes, it wasn't boxes. It was alive. She pressed her back against the wall, panic rising. Every instinct screamed at her, get out, call for help, don't go down there. But her gut, her need for answers, wouldn't let her turn away. She took a deep breath, clutching the railing of the narrow staircase, and began to descend. Each step creaked under her weight, the shadows seeming to stretch toward her like grasping fingers. Her eyes scanned the room below. And then, just as she reached the bottom, her foot brushed against something soft but solid, something she immediately recognized with horror. It was a box, a small, unassuming box, but inside, what she saw made her stomach drop and her breath catch. Blood-stained tools, restraints, journals, pages filled with meticulous notes and dates, and photographs, faces she didn't recognize at first, but some were local women she knew, women she passed on the street, women whose stories hadn't yet made the news. Emma staggered backward, gagging at the smell. Her mind couldn't process the horror. The man she had trusted with her life had been hiding this monstrosity beneath their feet. Every laugh, every kiss, every whispered promise of love, had it all been a lie? She wanted to scream, to run, to tear the house apart, but fear and disbelief held her frozen. Her hands shook as she picked up one of the journals. The entries were chilling, methodical, names, dates, and notes about victims. Some pages were photographs, some written in meticulous detail about how to avoid detection, how to keep the world from ever discovering the truth. Emma dropped the journal, stumbling backward. She had to leave. She had to survive. She had to warn someone. But as she turned to flee, she realized with absolute terror. The basement door was now partially closed, not entirely, but enough that she couldn't see the top of the stairs. Someone had been there, or something had been moved by him. Emma knew she had to get out, had to call the police, had to save herself before it was too late. But the thought lingered, twisting in her chest. How long had he planned this? How long had he hidden it from her, and how many more secrets were buried in the shadows of her home? Emma's hands shook as she backed away from the box of horrors, her mind racing. She needed help, now. She fumbled for her phone in her pocket, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. Yes, please. I need the police. She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. It's my husband. He's hiding something in the basement. I don't know what. Please hurry. The operator's voice was calm, professional, but Emma barely registered it. All she could hear was her own heartbeat, loud and erratic, echoing in her ears. Every second felt like an eternity. She glanced at the trapdoor again. The basement was silent now, the shadows stretching across the floor, but her gut told her they weren't alone. Daniel had been here. He had left the room, but for how long, and what had he done before? Within minutes, police cars arrived, their lights flashing blue and red across the quiet suburban street. Officers moved quickly, and Emma led them to the basement. Her hands pointed, trembling. It's under the rug, the trapdoor, down there, she said. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions serious. They had seen many strange scenes, but the fear in Emma's eyes told them this was serious. One officer approached the trapdoor cautiously, flashlight in hand, and slowly lifted it. The beam revealed the narrow staircase descending into darkness. Another officer went down first, scanning the room with a flashlight. The metallic scent hit their nostrils immediately, and one officer gagged slightly. Emma's stomach turned as she watched them uncover the truth. Boxes, tools, restraints, journals, and photographs, each item more disturbing than the last. Officers moved methodically, documenting everything. Every photograph was logged, every journal page photographed. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one officer asked gently. Emma shook her head. "No, I can't believe it. I trusted him. I loved him." The detective in charge, a tall man with a calm but commanding presence, looked at her. "Emma, we need to know if you've seen or heard anything else unusual, anything at all." She swallowed hard. There had been noises, late at night, boxes moving. I thought it was just him fixing things. I didn't want to doubt him, but I should have. I should have known. Officers called for backup and a forensic team. The basement became a controlled crime scene. Emma stayed nearby, shaking, haunted by the thought that Daniel had been hiding this double life under her very feet while she slept beside him every night. Detectives began piecing together evidence. Each journal entry, each photograph revealed a meticulous pattern. Daniel had been hiding crimes for years. He had planned every detail, taking care to maintain his image as the perfect husband. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers would never have suspected. Emma felt a cold, sinking realization. The man she had trusted with her life was capable of unimaginable evil, and she had lived in that house with him, day after day, completely unaware. The detective turned to her gently. "Emma, we need to keep you safe. There's a chance he could come back." Her heart jumped. The thought that Daniel might return to the home, to the basement, to her, made her want to run screaming, but she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she nodded, allowing the officers to guide her to a neighbor's house for safety. As she walked out into the night, watching the flashing lights illuminate her home, Emma realized something terrifying. Her life, her trust, her love, they had all been part of Daniel's carefully constructed illusion. And now there was no turning back. Emma sat on the neighbor's couch, wrapped in a blanket, her hands trembling. The flashing red and blue lights from the street reflected in the window, dancing across her tear-streaked face. Her home, the place she had once felt safe, was now a crime scene, a vault of horrors she could never unsee. Detectives worked methodically. Every box, every journal, every photograph was carefully cataloged. Emma watched as forensic specialists photographed the evidence, her stomach tightening with every detail they uncovered. The lead detective approached her again. "Emma, we need to know everything you've noticed over the past few months. Even the smallest detail could help us understand what he's done and protect anyone else." She took a deep breath. There were noises late at night. Things being moved in the basement, strange smells. He was distant sometimes, and I thought I was imagining it. I never thought it could be this. The detective nodded, jotting down notes. "You did the right thing by calling us. You're helping stop him from hurting anyone else." Meanwhile, forensic officers discovered something chilling. Beneath the concrete floor of the basement, there were signs of structural modifications. Hidden compartments, reinforced areas, and small crawl spaces. Daniel had designed the basement to conceal his crimes completely. Every inch was planned to remain undetected. Emma felt bile rise in her throat. The man she had shared her life with, the man she had trusted completely, had been hiding not just a secret, but an entire world of horror beneath their home. Neighbors were interviewed, friends questioned, and slowly, a picture of Daniel's double life began to emerge. He had been meticulous, planning every detail with the precision of a master manipulator. He had cultivated an image of the perfect husband while quietly constructing a hidden lair for his sinister activities. News crews began arriving outside Emma's home, broadcasting the story nationwide. The headlines screamed, "Husband's hidden basement of horror's shock suburb." Emma felt herself shrink under the weight of attention, her private terror made public for the world to see. At night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house, every wind gust against the windows made her jump. The realization that she had lived beside a monster for years without knowing it haunted her. Every shared laugh, every intimate moment, they were all tainted now by the shadow of his crimes, and then the most chilling realization hit her. Daniel was still out there. The man she had loved and trusted had disappeared the moment she called the police. He had prepared for this possibility, ensuring he could vanish without a trace. Emma hugged herself, shivering. The house she had once called home was no longer hers. Every corner, every shadow, every sound reminded her of the man she had married, a man who had been living a terrifying double life right under her nose. The lead detective placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "We'll find him, Emma. He won't get away. But you did the hardest thing, trusting your instincts and calling us. You saved lives." Emma nodded, though her mind was still reeling. She realized the nightmare was far from over. Daniel's secrets had been uncovered, but the danger was still real, and the path ahead would be filled with fear, uncertainty, and revelations she couldn't yet imagine. Days turned into a week, but Emma couldn't escape the nightmare. The police worked tirelessly, following leads, interviewing neighbors, friends, and colleagues. Slowly, the terrifying scope of Daniel's deception began to unfold. Daniel had been living a double life for years. While he smiled at neighbors and held Emma close, he meticulously documented crimes that were hidden from the world. Police discovered files on missing women, detailed maps of escape routes, and journals that outlined his manipulations and planning. Every page revealed a man capable of cruelty beyond imagination. Emma's phone never stopped ringing. Friends, relatives, and media outlets wanted answers, explanations. She couldn't give any. She didn't understand it herself. How could the man she loved and trusted hide such a life from her? Every memory of him now felt tainted, every intimate moment a reminder of the darkness she had unknowingly shared her home with. Then came the call from the lead detective. "Emma, we found something that could help us find him, but it's going to be difficult." Emma listened as the detective explained. They had discovered a series of hidden cameras in the basements, small, almost invisible devices that Daniel had installed to monitor the room and the house. Through these recordings, the police could track his movements, learn his patterns, and anticipate where he might go next. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. He had been watching the very woman he claimed to love, monitoring her every move, planning for every possibility. She had been under his gaze, his control, and hadn't even known it. The police now had a lead. Daniel's patterns suggested he had a network of safe houses and hidden stashes. He had been preparing for this day for months, possibly years. He was intelligent, calculating, and dangerous, a man who knew exactly how to disappear. Emma's heart ached, not just for herself, but for the women whose lives had intersected with Daniel's secret world. She couldn't imagine the fear they must have felt. The thought fueled her determination. She had survived, and she had to help the police stop him before he hurt anyone else. Meanwhile, the manhunt intensified. Police officers set up checkpoints, scoured highways, and monitored surveillance footage across multiple states. The media coverage was relentless, and the public was horrified. Headlines screamed Daniel's name, painting the image of a man whose charm masked the darkness beneath. Emma tried to sleep at her sister's house, but nightmares plagued her. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined Daniel watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She shook awake, the fear still clinging to her like a second skin. Through it all, Emma clung to one truth. She had survived, and she would continue to fight, to cooperate with the authorities, and to ensure that Daniel's reign of terror would end. But deep down, she knew the nightmare wasn't over. Daniel had prepared for every contingency, and the hunt was only just beginning. Emma could barely eat, barely sleep. Every news update, every police briefing made her stomach twist. Daniel wasn't just hiding, he was actively evading capture. The man she had loved and trusted had vanished, leaving behind a trail of fear and chaos. Detectives worked around the clock. They discovered more hidden caches, bags of supplies, fake IDs, and even stashed weapons. Daniel had planned for every possibility, every contingency. He wasn't just dangerous, he was a predator who had spent years perfecting the art of disappearance. Emma met with the lead detective again. He showed her a series of photographs taken from Daniel's hidden cameras. She saw herself sleeping, making tea, walking through the house unaware that every move was being recorded. She shivered. "He watched you," the detective said quietly. "Every moment, every habit. He knew you better than anyone. That's how he stayed hidden." Emma's chest tightened. The realization hit her harder than any evidence could. Daniel had not only deceived her, but had meticulously studied her, predicting her actions, her routines. She had been living in a controlled world, unknowingly manipulated by the man she trusted most. Meanwhile, police began receiving tips from the public. Someone had spotted a man matching Daniel's description near a gas station on the outskirts of town. Officers converged, but he had slipped away before they could reach him. Emma followed the updates obsessively, her mind in overdrive. She remembered the basement, the trapdoor, the journals, the photographs, and wondered how many more secrets Daniel had hidden, how many lives he had affected. Then came the most disturbing revelation. Police discovered Daniel's pattern of selecting victims. Each woman had crossed paths with him in some way. A coworker, a neighbor, a casual acquaintance. He had targeted people in his community, weaving a web of trust and normalcy to hide his true intentions. Emma felt bile rise in her throat. She had been so blind, so trusting, and yet somehow she had survived. She was lucky, but how many weren't? The manhunt intensified. Officers blocked highways, monitored surveillance cameras across multiple towns, and coordinated with neighboring states. Every tip was followed. Every clue meticulously examined, but Daniel was clever, methodical, and always one step ahead. Emma returned to her sister's home one night, exhausted, haunted, and frightened. She stared out the window, the streetlights casting long shadows across the yard. Somewhere out there, Daniel was moving, watching, waiting, and she knew deep down that the nightmare was far from over. Her fear was a constant companion, but so was her determination. She had survived, and she would continue to cooperate with law enforcement, no matter how painful it was. She had to. Daniel had been stopped once, but he could strike again if they weren't careful, and somewhere in the darkness, Daniel was planning his next move. The days blurred into nights. Emma couldn't escape the thought of Daniel, her husband, her betrayer, still at large. Every knock at the door, every shadow on the street made her flinch. She knew he was clever, patient, and calculated. He was somewhere out there, watching, waiting, and possibly planning. The police finally uncovered a breakthrough. One of Daniel's hidden cameras had recorded footage outside the neighborhood weeks before. Detectives had enhanced the images and discovered a trail of discarded belongings, gloves, maps, a backpack that Daniel had used to travel undetected. The realization hit hard. He had been preparing his escape for months, maybe years. Emma met with detectives again. "We think he's careful, very careful," one officer said. "But we also think he's getting complacent. He's been on the move, but the network of tips and surveillance may have cornered him." Emma's heart raced. The thought that he might finally be found brought a mix of relief and terror. She couldn't let her guard down, but she desperately hoped this nightmare was nearing an end. Then the investigators revealed more. Daniel's pattern of crimes was horrifyingly methodical. He had been targeting women in his community for years, studying their routines, learning their vulnerabilities. The journals found in the basement were just the tip of the iceberg. Police uncovered old photographs, hidden recordings, and plans for abductions that had never come to fruition, but could have. Emma shivered as she saw the list. Names she didn't recognize, women who had no idea how close danger had come. And she realized she had survived, but others might not have been so lucky. The manhunt intensified. Officers coordinated with neighboring states, airports, bus stations, and surveillance networks. Every lead was followed, every tip investigated. Daniel was meticulous, but even the most careful predator makes mistakes, and the police were determined to find him before anyone else got hurt. Emma's nights remained sleepless. She dreamt of the basement, the trapdoor, the journals, and the hidden cameras. She dreamt of Daniel watching, planning, smiling at her oblivion. Each morning she awoke with a tight chest and a mind racing with fear and anger. Yet, amidst the terror, she felt a spark of determination. She had survived, she had called the police, she had exposed his hidden world, and she would see this through. Emma began cooperating even more closely with detectives, reviewing old photographs and videos, providing insight into Daniel's habits and mannerisms. Her knowledge of his routines became a key tool in the investigation. For the first time, she allowed herself a small, cautious hope. Maybe, just maybe, Daniel's reign of terror was about to end. Weeks of fear, sleepless nights, and relentless investigation had led to this moment. The police had tracked Daniel to a remote cabin, miles from the town he had terrorized for so long. Emma sat quietly in her sister's car, watching the flashing lights in the distance, heart hammering. Detectives had called her early that morning, asking her to stay nearby. "Emma, we have a visual on him. Stay calm and trust the team," the lead detective instructed. Her stomach churned. She wanted to be anywhere else, but she also knew she had to see this through. Emma remembered the basement, the trapdoor, the journals, and the cameras. Every memory twisted with betrayal and fear. Daniel had manipulated her, studied her, and controlled her life without her knowing. And now, after everything, he was finally cornered. She clutched her sister's hand as the officers prepared to move in. The standoff was tense, silent, but for the crackling radios and whispered instructions. They had to act carefully. Daniel was dangerous, cunning, and desperate. From a distance, Emma caught sight of him, calm, almost eerily normal, standing at the edge of the cabin, surveying the area. He looked like the man she once loved, and yet the horror of what he had done made her stomach twist. A sudden flash of lights, voices shouting commands, and officers advancing with caution. Daniel attempted to flee, but the coordinated effort was precise. Within minutes, he was restrained, handcuffed, and taken into custody. Emma's knees buckled as she watched the scene unfold. Relief washed over her, but it was laced with lingering fear, sorrow, and disbelief. The man she had trusted, loved, and shared her life with had been unmasked, and yet he was finally behind bars. Detectives approached her gently. "Emma, it's over. He won't be hurting anyone else." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It's over, but it won't ever feel the same. I trusted him. I loved him, and it was all a lie." The investigators reassured her. "You did the right thing by trusting your instincts. You helped stop him." Emma's gaze returned to the cabin where Daniel had hidden, manipulated, and terrorized. The weight of everything she had endured pressed on her, but amidst it all, she felt a quiet strength. She had survived, she had called for help, and she had faced the unimaginable. The nightmare had ended, but the scars remained. Emma would carry them forever, but she had also discovered something vital: resilience, courage, the ability to rise above betrayal and horror. And somewhere in the aftermath, she knew that while Daniel's shadow would linger, she would no longer be a victim of it. She was free. The day after Daniel's arrest, the town felt different. The streets buzzed with whispers, neighbors spoke in hushed tones, and news crews crowded every corner. Emma watched from a distance, her heart heavy with relief and grief. Police had begun the painstaking process of cataloging all the evidence recovered from Daniel's home. Forensic teams worked tirelessly, sifting through journals, photographs, and hidden compartments. Each discovery revealed more of the terrifying double life he had lived, the lives he had manipulated, and the danger he had posed. Emma sat in her sister's kitchen, staring at the phone. Calls, messages, and emails poured in from reporters, friends, and acquaintances, all wanting to know her side of the story. She didn't have words. She hadn't fully processed everything. The man she had loved was gone from her life, but the horror of his actions lingered, like a shadow she couldn't shake. Detectives kept her updated. "Emma, you've been incredibly strong," the lead investigator told her. "Your information helped us catch him. The evidence is solid, and he's facing justice." Emma nodded, swallowing back tears. "It feels unreal," she whispered. "All those years, all the trust, and it was just a lie." Media coverage intensified as news outlets broadcast Daniel's crimes nationwide. Headlines screamed, "Suburban husband's secret basement of horrors revealed," "Local woman's courage leads to arrest," "Predator caught," "Community in shock." Emma's name was mentioned sparingly, but she felt exposed all the same. Despite the public attention, Emma focused on the future. She met with counselors, began therapy, and sought support from friends and family. Every day was a battle to reclaim normalcy, but she knew she couldn't let fear control her life. Meanwhile, investigators worked on connecting the dots, identifying victims, notifying families, and preparing the case for court. The evidence from the basement was overwhelming. Daniel had meticulously documented everything: patterns, routines, potential victims, and contingencies. He was methodical, intelligent, and deeply dangerous. But he had been caught, and justice would follow. Emma felt a mixture of relief and lingering terror. She had survived a man who had been hiding darkness under her very roof. She had trusted him, loved him, and had been deceived in the most intimate way possible. But she had also survived, and that survival had made a difference. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel a small sense of peace. The nightmare was not over. Daniel's still-faced trial, and the world would know the full extent of his crimes. But she was free from the immediate danger, and she could finally begin to reclaim her life. Weeks later, the courtroom was tense and silent. Emma sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring at the man who had once been her husband. Daniel sat at the defendant's table, calm and composed, but the evidence stacked against him was overwhelming. The prosecutor began, laying out the horrifying details: the journals, the photographs, the hidden compartments in the basement, and the meticulous plans for abductions. Every page, every image, every note told a story of manipulation, deception, and calculated cruelty. Emma's stomach churned as the evidence was presented. Each photograph reminded her of the life she had shared with him, the smiles, the laughs, the intimate moments. And yet, each smile was now tainted with the shadow of the man's dark, secret life. Witnesses were called: neighbors, friends, and law enforcement officers who had worked tirelessly to bring Daniel to justice. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of the man she had trusted, a man who had concealed a monstrous reality beneath a facade of normalcy. Emma listened quietly, tears stinging her eyes. She felt anger, grief, and relief all at once. The man who had betrayed her so completely was finally being held accountable. And yet, the emotional scars he left behind would take much longer to heal. The judge addressed the court, emphasizing the severity of Daniel's crimes. Emma felt a small flicker of justice ignite in her chest. She had survived, she had exposed the truth, and now the law was catching up to him. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Emma stayed calm, supported by her sister and close friends. She spoke briefly, her voice steady. "I want to thank the police and investigators who helped catch him, and I hope this serves as a warning. Trust your instincts. Something felt wrong, and I spoke up. That's what saved lives." As the trial continued, Emma found herself beginning to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Counseling, supportive friends, and the closure of seeing Daniel held accountable gave her strength. She knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in months, she felt hope. The house where she had once lived, the basement where horrors were hidden, was now being investigated and cleared. The memories would never disappear, but Emma was determined not to let them define her future. She looked toward the horizon, taking a deep breath. The nightmare had ended, justice was being served, and though scars remained, Emma had survived, and she would thrive. The courtroom had become a stage for truth. Emma watched silently as prosecutors continued to unravel Daniel's meticulous web of lies. Every journal entry, every photograph, every hidden compartment revealed a new layer of horror, but also a layer of relief. He had been caught. Witnesses testified about near misses, unreported incidents, and the sheer cunning of his deception. Some spoke of small moments that now seemed terrifyingly insignificant. A neighbor recalling seeing him in the backyard late at night, a coworker remembering unexplained absences. Each recollection painted a picture of a man hiding in plain sight, a predator camouflaged by normalcy. Emma's hands rested in her lap, but inside, her emotions swirled. There was anger at the betrayal, at the years of trust she had given him. There was sorrow for herself, for the women whose lives had intersected with Daniel, and for the innocence that had been shattered. And there was a glimmer of something else, empowerment. She had survived, and in doing so had helped expose him. The judge called a recess. Emma stepped outside into the courtyard, breathing deeply. The sunlight was harsh after the dim courtroom, but it felt like freedom. She felt the weight of the past months pressing against her chest, but she also felt a shift, a realization that she could rebuild. Her sister approached, offering a supportive smile. "You're doing amazing," she said softly. Emma nodded, the corners of her lips twitching into a small, hesitant smile. Detectives approached with updates. "We've identified additional victims thanks to the evidence you helped provide." One said, "Your bravery is helping others find justice." Emma felt a rush of emotion. She had feared being powerless, being a victim of circumstances beyond her control. But now, she realized that her actions had made a difference. By speaking up, by trusting her instincts, she had stopped Daniel from harming anyone else. That evening, as the courtroom emptied and the media frenzy settled, Emma sat quietly in a park nearby. The wind rustled the trees, carrying with it a sense of calm she hadn't felt in months. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine a life beyond fear, one where she could reclaim her home, her routines, her peace of mind. She thought of the basement, the journals, and the hidden cameras, horrors she would never forget, but she also thought of herself, resilient, determined, and courageous. Emma knew the road ahead would be long. Therapy, rebuilding her life, dealing with the media attention. It wouldn't be easy, but she also knew this. The man who had hidden his darkness beneath her home was finally behind bars. The nightmare had ended. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she could imagine a future where she was free. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with spectators, journalists, and law enforcement. Emma sat forward, hands clasped, every muscle tense. Today, the prosecution would reveal more of Daniel's darkest secrets, details from journals that even the investigators hadn't fully processed. The lead prosecutor addressed the jury with a steely voice. Daniel's manipulation didn't stop with hiding objects in a basement. He studied, observed, and preyed on the trust of those closest to him. His journals are a roadmap of deception, cruelty, and premeditation. Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She remembered every smile, every kind word he had spoken, now twisted in her mind as calculated tools for control. The first journal page was displayed on a projector. Scribbled notes detailed behaviors, patterns, and even a timetable of his actions over months. He had tracked people meticulously, noting weaknesses, schedules, and routines. Emma's pulse raced as the camera panned over the pages. The prosecution continued, calling in investigators who had worked for hours deciphering Daniel's meticulous records. They spoke of the hidden compartments, the hidden cameras, and the extensive network of supplies Daniel had stashed in his safe houses. Every word painted him as a master manipulator, methodical and dangerous. Emma gritted her teeth, refusing to let tears fall. She felt anger boil up inside her, a mix of betrayal and horror, and yet she felt something else, a rising strength. She had survived this man. She had called the police. And now the truth was being laid bare for everyone to see. The defense attorney attempted to discredit some of the evidence, suggesting the journals were mere fantasies or exaggerations. But the prosecutor's response was swift and precise, presenting corroborating evidence from the hidden cameras, photographs, and recorded movements. The jury could see the pattern. Daniel had orchestrated everything with chilling precision. Emma watched Daniel's face as the evidence mounted, calm, controlled, yet a flicker of tension crossed his eyes. For the first time, she saw that the mask was slipping. As the session adjourned for a short recess, Emma stepped outside into the courthouse courtyard, inhaling deep, cold air. The wind stung her cheeks, but it felt like freedom, an invisible weight lifting slightly from her shoulders. She knew the path ahead was far from over. Weeks of testimony, more evidence, and public scrutiny awaited. But for the first time in months, Emma felt something she hadn't dared to feel. Hope hope that Daniel's reign of terror was unraveling, hope that justice would be served, hope that she could survive this and reclaim her life. Emma's heart pounded as she approached the house, the place that had once been her sanctuary, now a symbol of betrayal and horror. Police officers and investigators were already inside, meticulously combing every corner for evidence. Emma followed closely, flinching at every creak of the floorboards. Walking through the living room felt like stepping into a nightmare. The laughter, the shared meals, the quiet evenings on the couch. They all felt tainted now. She could almost hear Daniel's voice, his calm, reassuring tone that had masked his deception. The lead investigator gestured toward the basement. "We want you to see it, Emma. One last walkthrough. It may help us finalize evidence for court." Emma's stomach tightened, but she nodded. The trapdoor, once hidden beneath the rug, now lay exposed. With trembling hands, she descended into the dimly lit basement, the cold concrete sending shivers up her spine. Boxes and journals were stacked methodically, evidence bags labeled and cataloged. The hidden compartments had been revealed, the cameras removed, but the presence of Daniel lingered in every shadow. Flashbacks surged unbidden. Daniel smiling as he reassured her during late night noises, pretending to search for missing items he had hidden. Subtle manipulations, casual lies that now felt like calculated maneuvers. Emma's chest tightened. She had lived under his watchful eye, unaware that every move she made had been observed. The investigator handed her one of the journals. "Take a look," he said gently. "It might help you understand the scope of his deception." Emma flipped through the pages. Handwritten notes detailed behaviors, observations, and calculations. Names, dates, times, all meticulously recorded. The realization of how closely Daniel had monitored her life made her stomach churn. Yet as fear and anger bubbled within her, she felt a spark of resolve. She had survived him, she had uncovered his secrets, and now every piece of evidence she witnessed would help bring him to justice. Emerging from the basement, Emma took a deep breath. The house still held memories, but she was no longer a prisoner of them. She had faced the place where her trust had been betrayed, and she had endured. The lead investigator nodded. "You've been brave, Emma, walking through here like this. It's not easy, but your strength will help the jury see the truth." Emma's eyes met his. For the first time, she felt a sense of control over her story. The nightmare had begun in this very house, but it would end with her reclaiming her life. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the next witnesses were called. Families of women who had narrowly escaped Daniel's manipulations stepped forward, their faces etched with fear, anger, and lingering trauma. Each story revealed a fragment of the nightmare Emma had only glimpsed. One by one, the witnesses recounted encounters with Daniel. Small moments that seemed harmless at the time, but in hindsight, were carefully orchestrated acts of control and deception. A former neighbor described how Daniel had befriended her before subtly isolating her from friends. A coworker spoke of unexplained absences and late-night phone calls, painting a picture of a man who studied and preyed upon trust. Emma listened, her chest tightening. Every word brought a shiver of recognition, the same techniques Daniel had used on her, the same manipulations, the same careful observation. She realized the full extent of his cunning. He hadn't just deceived her, he had a pattern, a method, a system. The prosecution allowed Emma to speak briefly. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. "I trusted him completely," she said. "I believed in the life we were building, but what I see now, it was all a lie. He studied me, watched me, and manipulated everyone around him. I survived. Others may not have been so lucky. This man is dangerous, and he needs to be held accountable." The courtroom was silent. Her words carried weight, not just as testimony, but as a warning, a reflection of courage born from survival. The jury leaned forward, absorbing every detail, while Daniel's calm facade began to crack. Witness after witness reinforced the prosecution's case. Daniel's journals, hidden cameras, and meticulous notes corroborated their stories. The pattern of deception, manipulation, and predation was undeniable. Even the defense attorney's attempts to discredit the witnesses faltered under the weight of evidence and emotion. Emma felt a strange combination of relief and horror. Relief that the truth was finally being revealed, horror at how calculated and dangerous Daniel truly was. She had lived in a world of lies, and now the world was seeing it for what it was. As the session adjourned for the day, Emma stepped outside the courthouse. The winter sun glinted off the pavement, but the cold couldn't numb the mix of emotions coursing through her. She had faced the nightmare in court, seen the truth unfold, and lent her voice to the story of survival. She knew the road ahead. Testimony, verdict, and eventual closure would be long. But for the first time in months, she felt the faint pulse of hope. The nightmare was unraveling, and justice was on its way. The courtroom was electric with tension. Every eye was fixed on Daniel, every ear tuned to the testimonies being presented. His defense attorney rose, attempting a strategy that bordered on audacious. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The attorney began, voice smooth and calculated. What has been presented here is a series of coincidences, exaggerations, and assumptions. My client is being painted as a villain based on interpretations rather than facts. Emma's chest tightened. She gritted her teeth, refusing to let anger distract her. She knew the truth. She had lived it. Every detail, every manipulation, every lie was real. The prosecutor was ready. "Your Honor, if I may," they said firmly. "We will demonstrate through tangible evidence, corroborated witness testimony, and the defendant's own journals that these were not coincidences. This was calculated, deliberate, and sustained over years." Pages of Daniel's journals were displayed on the large courtroom screen. Every entry detailed precise observations, hidden actions, and manipulations, including notes on Emma herself. The jury could see his meticulous planning, the calculated way he preyed on trust and orchestrated fear. The defense attorney attempted to argue that Daniel's writings were fantasy, a form of private journaling, but investigators called forward evidence from hidden cameras, stashes of supplies, and corroborating witness statements. The pattern was undeniable. Emma watched Daniel shift in his seat. His calm demeanor wavered. The mask he had worn for so long, charming husband, ordinary neighbor, was cracking. She felt a wave of vindication, but also a deep, simmering anger. This was the man who had invaded her life, studied her every move, and manipulated her trust. And now, the truth was being exposed for all to see. The courtroom atmosphere grew heavier as more witnesses testified, each story reinforcing the meticulous and dangerous nature of Daniel's actions. Emma realized the jury could finally see the full scope of his deception. By the end of the day, Daniel sat in silence, hands clasped, eyes darting nervously as the weight of the evidence pressed down. Emma stepped outside the courthouse for air, the winter chill cutting through her coat. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion, relief, and empowerment. For the first time in months, she believed that justice wasn't just a word. It was real, tangible, and within reach. And Daniel, the man who had hidden his darkness behind her trust, was finally cornered. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Every person present knew the gravity of the moment. This was the culmination of months of fear, investigation, and heartbreak. Emma sat forward, her hands clenched in her lap, her gaze fixed on Daniel. The lead prosecutor rose, voice steady, but carrying the weight of every life Daniel had touched. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have seen the evidence. You have heard the testimonies. What has been revealed is not conjecture. It is a documented pattern of manipulation, deceit, and predation. Daniel meticulously planned, observed, and executed a life built on lies and control." The room was tense, every word sinking in. Emma's mind replayed the basement, the journals, the hidden cameras, and every subtle manipulation Daniel had used to control her life. She swallowed hard, letting the memories fuel her resolve. The prosecutor's voice grew more forceful. He targeted the people closest to him, those who trusted him implicitly. He monitored them, recorded them, and manipulated their lives. His journals detail not fantasies, but actions and observations. He was methodical, calculating, and dangerous. Emma felt her chest tighten, relief mixed with anger and disbelief. The man she had loved and trusted was being laid bare, exposed for exactly what he was. A predator who had hidden behind a mask of normalcy. The prosecutor paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Emma and countless others survived because they trusted their instincts and spoke up. Today, justice must be served. We ask you to consider the evidence, the testimonies, and the truth. Daniel must be held accountable for every calculated, cruel, and deliberate act he committed. The jury sat in solemn silence, absorbing the closing argument. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a subtle flicker of panic crossing his eyes. For months, he had hidden in plain sight, manipulating, observing, controlling. But now, the walls of deception had crumbled. Emma exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her body begin to release. The nightmare had not yet fully ended, but for the first time, hope felt tangible. Justice was close. Daniel had been cornered, exposed, and powerless in the face of overwhelming truth. She looked around the courtroom, noting the faces of jurors, witnesses, and law enforcement officers who had worked tirelessly to bring him down. This was a moment of reckoning, a turning point that would define not only Daniel's fate but the future of everyone he had manipulated. The prosecution returned to their seat. Emma's gaze never wavered from Daniel. The man she had once trusted was finally vulnerable, and the scales of justice were tipping toward closure. The courtroom was eerily silent as the judge instructed the jury to begin deliberations. Emma sat forward, hands clasped, her heart pounding in her chest. Every second felt like an eternity. Months of fear, sleepless nights, and relentless investigation had led to this moment. She had survived Daniel's manipulation, exposed his secrets, and faced the terrifying truth in court. Now, the fate of the man who had upended her life rested in the hands of 12 strangers. Outside the courtroom, reporters whispered to one another, cameras flashing through the large windows. Emma barely noticed them. All that mattered was the jury and the verdict that could finally bring closure. She thought of the basement, the hidden compartments, the journals, the cameras. She thought of the subtle ways Daniel had infiltrated her life, the manipulations she had missed, the fear she had endured. And she thought of herself, brave, resilient, and determined. She had survived, and she had fought back. Minutes stretched into hours. Emma's hands clenched tighter as she imagined the jurors reading, discussing, and weighing each piece of evidence. She could almost hear Daniel's thoughts, the mask of calm he wore so effortlessly now cracking under the pressure of exposure. Finally, the judge called the court back into session. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the jury filed in, their expressions unreadable. The forepersons stood and cleared their throat. "Your Honor," they began, voice steady, "we have reached a verdict." Emma's eyes fixed on Daniel. His expression was tense, almost imperceptibly nervous. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The foreperson continued, "We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel last name, guilty on all counts as charged." A wave of relief and emotion crashed over Emma. She felt tears welling in her eyes, her body trembling as the weight of months of fear and uncertainty began to lift. Daniel's mask of control had finally been shattered. The judge banged the gavel, declaring the courtroom in order. Daniel was led away in handcuffs, his face a mix of disbelief and defeat. Justice finally had been served. Emma sat for a long moment, letting the emotions wash over her, relief, sorrow, and a quiet sense of victory. She had survived unimaginable betrayal, and the man who had controlled her life for so long was now powerless. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun felt warmer than ever. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the cold wind against her face and a sense of liberation in her chest. The nightmare was over. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could imagine a future free from fear, a future where she controlled her own life. And as she walked away from the courthouse, surrounded by the support of friends and family, Emma knew she was ready to reclaim it. The gavel had fallen hours ago, yet Emma still felt the courtroom's weight pressing on her chest. Outside, the winter sun reflected off the courthouse windows, but the glare didn't mask the sea of reporters, cameras, and microphones waiting to capture her every word. Emma took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill her lungs. The chill bit at her face, but it felt cleansing, a reminder that she was no longer trapped in Daniel's shadows. She walked toward the reporters, flanked by her sister and a few close friends who had supported her every step of the way. Emma, a reporter called, "How does it feel to see justice served?" Her voice was steady, carrying both relief and measured resolve. "It's a relief, yes, but it's also a reminder of what survivors endure. I hope my story encourages others to trust their instincts and speak out. That's what helped me survive, and what brought justice today." Flashes of cameras lit up her face. She forced herself to stay composed, though inside, tears threatened to spill. Months of fear, sleepless nights, and whispered doubts had led to this moment. Daniel, the man who had hidden horrors in her home, was now powerless. After the media frenzy, Emma retreated with her sister to a quiet nearby cafe. She sipped hot coffee, trying to center herself. The emotions were overwhelming: relief, sorrow, lingering anger, but also a small glimmer of hope. "Are you okay?" her sister asked softly. Emma nodded, her fingers tightening around the cup. "I think so," she said. "It's the first time in months that I feel like I can breathe, like the nightmare isn't controlling me anymore." The rest of the day was spent with family and friends, recounting memories of fear, strength, and resilience. Emma knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Therapy, media scrutiny, and reclaiming her home awaited, but for the first time, she felt a sense of control returning. That evening, alone for a moment, Emma looked out her apartment window. The city lights twinkled like distant stars. The nightmare had ended, Daniel had been held accountable, and she had survived. She whispered quietly to herself, "I'm free, and I will reclaim my life." For the first time in months, she truly believed it. Weeks after the verdict, Emma returned to the house, the place that had once been her sanctuary and her prison. The neighborhood felt different now, quieter, yet memories clung to every corner. The driveway, the front door, even the porch, all were reminders of Daniel's deception. Police investigators met her at the gate, ready to perform one last sweep of the house. Every hidden camera had been removed, every secret compartment cataloged, yet Emma couldn't shake the unease that lingered in the air. Walking through the living room, she noticed the faint marks where rugs had once covered the trapdoor to the basement. Her chest tightened as memories surfaced. The laughter she had once shared with Daniel, now twisted with betrayal. The lead investigator offered a reassuring nod. "We've cleared everything. The house is safe now. It's yours to reclaim." Emma hesitated, taking a deep breath. For months, the walls had felt like they were closing in, holding the shadows of her trauma. Now, she realized that reclaiming the house meant reclaiming herself. She stepped into the basement, where Daniel had hidden his secrets. The concrete floor was cold under her feet, the shadows longer than before, yet she felt a spark of courage ignite. She examined the cleared evidence, letting herself imagine the space free from fear. As she emerged back into the light, Emma's sister was waiting, arms open. Emma embraced her tightly, letting tears fall freely for the first time in months. The nightmare wasn't erased, but she was reclaiming control. Over the next few hours, Emma and her sister began removing remnants of the past old furniture, trinkets, anything tied to Daniel's manipulations. Each item discarded felt like a small victory, a symbolic act of freedom. By evening, the house was quiet, cleansed of its dark energy. Emma walked through every room, breathing deeply, feeling the space slowly transform from a site of terror into a place of safety. Sitting in the living room, she allowed herself a small smile. The house had been Daniel's domain for too long, but now it belonged to her again, and with it came a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in months, a reassurance that the future was hers to shape, free from fear. Life after the courtroom wasn't easy. Even though Daniel was behind bars, Emma felt the invisible weight of months spent under his control. Fear had been her constant companion for too long, but now she was determined to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. Her days began slowly, morning coffee without a sense of dread, a walk through the park, small routines that reminded her she was free. Each small victory, however minor, was a step toward healing. Emma began attending therapy sessions. At first, she was hesitant, unsure of how to articulate the fear, anger, and betrayal she had experienced. But with time, the sessions became a sanctuary, a place to untangle her thoughts and regain her sense of self. The therapist encouraged her to journal her feelings, to confront the memories of Daniel's manipulation not with fear, but with clarity and understanding. Emma wrote pages filled with reflection, the hidden cameras, the journals, the subtle lies that had gone unnoticed for months. Writing became a way to reclaim her narrative. Outside therapy, Emma started reconnecting with friends she had drifted from during Daniel's control. Coffee dates, late-night phone calls, and laughter that felt unfamiliar but freeing slowly returned to her life. Each interaction was a reminder that the world beyond Daniel's shadow was still alive, vibrant, and welcoming. One afternoon, as Emma walked through the park, sunlight filtering through the trees, she felt a quiet pride. She had survived a man who had studied her every move, controlled her life, and hidden horrors beneath her home. She had faced him in court, endured the scrutiny of the media, and emerged stronger. Yet there was still a lingering vigilance, a reminder that trauma leaves its mark. But Emma knew that being vigilant didn't mean being afraid. It meant being empowered, aware, and ready to protect herself and others from deception. By the end of the month, she had begun volunteering for a local support group for survivors of manipulation and abuse. Sharing her story, listening to others, and offering guidance became a new purpose. Emma had transformed her pain into strength, her fear into advocacy. Sitting on a park bench one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emma whispered to herself, "I am more than the fear. I am stronger than the shadows he left behind, and this life, it's mine again." Even with Daniel behind bars, Emma couldn't completely let her guard down. A few weeks after reclaiming her home, she received a call from Detective Harris, the lead investigator who had worked tirelessly on her case. "Emma," he said, voice serious, "we've uncovered some additional evidence. It looks like Daniel may have had connections we didn't fully understand, hidden stashes, communications with other victims we hadn't identified. It's more extensive than we thought." Emma's stomach twisted. The thought that Daniel's manipulations extended beyond her life was unsettling, but she refused to let fear dominate her. She had survived him once, and she was determined to stay vigilant. Over the next few days, she met with detectives and investigators, reviewing files, photographs, and recovered items. Each piece of evidence was shocking, a chilling reminder of how calculated and widespread Daniel's actions had been. But Emma met it all with clarity and resolve. One evening, as she reviewed photographs of recovered journals, Emma realized something crucial: knowledge was power. By understanding the full scope of Daniel's network, she could help prevent others from falling victim. The media had begun to catch wind of these new developments, but Emma chose her words carefully in interviews. She spoke not out of fear, but out of empowerment. "The more we understand about these manipulations," she said, "the more we can protect ourselves and others. Awareness is the first step toward prevention." Evenings were still hard. Flashbacks of hidden cameras, secret compartments, and Daniel's manipulations sometimes intruded, but Emma had learned to face them without letting panic take over. She journaled, meditated, and reached out to friends for support. Each night, she reminded herself, vigilance does not equal fear. By the end of the month, Emma had collaborated with authorities to trace several of Daniel's additional victims. Her courage and attention to detail were instrumental in connecting the pieces of his web, ensuring that more people could find justice and closure. Standing on her apartment balcony one evening, looking out over the city lights, Emma whispered softly, I face the nightmare, and I will keep shining the light. No shadows can control me again. The call came late in the evening. Detective Harris's voice was tense. Emma, we've found something. More. Hidden stashes in Daniel's other properties. Journals, recordings, items linked to other victims. This is bigger than we thought. Emma's heart pounded. She felt a surge of anxiety, but it was accompanied by something stronger, resolve. She would not let Daniel's manipulations continue in silence. The next day, Emma joined investigators at one of the properties. The house was decrepit, dust coating every surface, shadows stretching across empty rooms. It had once been one of Daniel's hideouts, carefully hidden from public view. Boxes were stacked high in the corners, and journals, carefully labeled, were spread across tables. Some contained detailed observations about people she had never met. Others recorded Daniel's manipulations in chilling detail. The scale of his deception was staggering. Emma shivered but forced herself to stay present. She read through pages, piecing together timelines, cross-referencing with known victims, and helping investigators identify additional individuals who might be at risk. One journal detailed Daniel's obsession with controlling narratives, how he studied every relationship, every routine, and every habit of those around him. Emma felt a cold knot in her stomach as she realized the extent of his planning. Yet amidst the fear, Emma felt clarity. She was no longer a passive observer in Daniel's world. She had survived, she had testified, and now she was actively dismantling the network he had created. Hours passed. Boxes were cataloged, evidence secured, and potential victims contacted. Emma's phone buzzed constantly with new updates from the investigative team. Each message was a reminder Daniel's reach had been long, but it was not invincible. By evening, the property was cleared. Emma stood in the center of the living room, sunlight filtering through grimy windows. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of exhaustion, relief, and purpose. Every secret he tried to hide. She whispered, is coming into the light, and I will make sure it stays there. For the first time, she felt a profound sense of empowerment. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was actively protecting others, turning her trauma into action, and shining a light on the shadows Daniel had created. Even as Daniel's network unraveled, Emma found that her battle wasn't entirely over. The echoes of his manipulation lingered, surfacing unexpectedly in quiet moments. An empty hallway, the sound of a door creaking, or a forgotten corner of her home. One evening, Emma sat on her bed, journaling, when a memory struck her with sharp clarity. Daniel's calm voice instructing her to check locks she hadn't locked. The subtle way he observed her every move. The hidden cameras she had missed. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, fear surged. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe. This time, she wasn't alone. Therapy had taught her grounding techniques, moments to center herself when panic threatened. Slowly, she felt the tension ease, replaced by a growing awareness of her own resilience. Emma realized something important. Trauma doesn't vanish, it transforms, and how she responded to it could define the rest of her life. She began confronting flashbacks deliberately, not as a victim, but as someone reclaiming her narrative. Over the next few days, she revisited the house once more, not as a survivor fearing shadows, but as a woman asserting ownership over her space. She walked through each room, touched familiar walls, and let herself imagine them free of Daniel's presence. Each step was a subtle act of empowerment. In therapy, she reflected on the journals and evidence she had reviewed with investigators. She discussed how she had felt controlled, invisible, and monitored, and how reclaiming awareness had shifted the balance of power back to her. Evenings became her sanctuary. She meditated, exercised, and wrote in her journal, not to record fear, but to track progress, victories, and growth. Each entry ended with the same affirmation: I am not defined by his control. I am stronger, aware, and free. One night, Emma stood by her apartment window, looking at the city lights. Shadows of the past still lingered faintly, but she no longer feared them. Instead, she felt gratitude for her survival, her courage, and the chance to shape her life on her own terms. "I will never forget," she whispered, "but I will never be imprisoned by fear again." Emma knew her journey was ongoing. Trauma may leave its mark, but so does resilience, and she was determined to let her shine. Emma's work didn't stop with Daniel behind bars. The investigators discovered additional charges and potential victims connected to his network, and Emma knew she had a responsibility to help others find closure. She attended meetings with prosecutors and detectives, going over recovered evidence, clarifying timelines, and assisting in identifying victims who had never spoken up. Each meeting reminded her of the scale of Daniel's manipulations and the importance of turning her trauma into purpose. Soon, the media approached her again. Cameras, microphones, and flashing lights were intimidating, but Emma had grown stronger. She spoke confidently, not about fear, but about vigilance, awareness, and advocacy. "Daniel's network affected more people than we initially realized," she said in one interview. "But by sharing stories, supporting survivors, and staying vigilant, we can prevent further harm. Awareness saves lives." Her words resonated. Survivors reached out to her, sharing stories, expressing gratitude, and seeking guidance. Emma listened, offered advice, and encouraged them to work with authorities. She realized her pain